The controversy that changed everything. There are moments in sport that go beyond the scoreline. Moments that crack open something bigger. Debates, divisions, conversations that spread far beyond the stadium and refuse to die down. What happened to Alex Eala in Berlin was one of those moments. It began as a tennis match. It ended as something far more complicated. And by the time the full story came into focus, it had touched on everything from fairness and fame to national pride and the unwritten rules of professional sport. This is that story. And the further you go into it, the more surprising it becomes. The rise nobody predicted not long ago. The name Alex Eala meant very little outside the Philippines. She was a quiet prospect, a product of the Rafael Nadal Academy in Mallorca. A teenager with disciplined footwork, a precise backhand, and the kind of focused determination that coaches recognize immediately, but the wider world rarely notices until it's too late. In 2022, she made history, becoming the first Filipina to win a junior Grand Slam singles title when she lifted the trophy at the U.S. Open Girls Championship. It was remarkable. It was celebrated. And then, beyond the tight circle of dedicated tennis followers, it was largely forgotten. Nobody saw what was coming. Everything changed in 2025. Eala broke new ground again, this time by becoming the first Filipina to win a WTA Challenger-level title, capturing the Guadalajara 125 Open. Then the performances that truly turned heads began to arrive. She stormed into the semifinals at Miami. She defeated Grand Slam champions. She climbed the rankings with a consistency that couldn't be explained away by favorable draws or lucky weeks. And with every victory, the narrative around her shifted, from promising prospect to legitimate rising star. By the beginning of 2026, stepping onto any court carrying her name meant something different. Her matches attracted attention beyond the sport. Her fan base had expanded at a pace that surprised even the most experienced voices in women's tennis. Thousands of passionate Filipino supporters began following her journey, not just from home but in person, traveling across countries and continents to cheer her on, bringing their flags, their songs, and an intensity that transformed tournament atmospheres in a way that hadn't been seen in years. Wherever Alex Eala played, the stadium felt louder. The air felt different. And over the previous 52 weeks, the numbers backed up everything the atmosphere suggested. A 48 wins and 28 losses record. Over 63% of her matches won against WTA competition. These weren't the statistics of a feel-good story built on sentiment and social media. They were the numbers of a genuine contender, a player earning her place among the sport's emerging elite through work, consistency, and results delivered under real pressure. That was the player who arrived in Berlin. The opponent, the history, the weight. To understand what happened at the Berlin Open, you first have to understand who is standing on the other side of the net. Donna Vekić is not a supporting character in anyone's story. She is a battle-tested professional who has spent years competing against the very best players on the planet. An Olympic silver medalist at the 2024 Paris Games. A Wimbledon semi-finalist. A player with deep runs at the Australian Open and US Open and a resume that demands respect from anyone who knows the sport. This is not someone you overlook. This is not someone who arrives at tournaments simply hoping for a good draw. She arrives expecting to win. That background is what made the collision between Eala and Vekic so charged, and what made what had already happened between them impossible to ignore. Because before Berlin, they had already met. Twice. And both times, the result was the same. The first meeting came at the 2026 ASB Classic in Auckland. On paper, it should have been straightforward for Vekic, a seasoned veteran controlling the tempo against a rising 21-year-old. And for a full set, that's exactly what it looked like. Eala dropped the first set. She was visibly fatigued, dealing with physical discomfort, absorbing the kind of precision that experienced players use to dismantle opponents who haven't yet learned how to suffer through a long match. She even needed a medical timeout before the deciding set. Most players don't come back from that position against a player like Vekic. The momentum is too established, the gap in experience too significant. But Eala came back. 3 sets. Nearly 3 hours. A victory earned through a determination that left even neutral observers unable to look away. Then, just over a week later, they met again, this time at the Kriong Classic in Melbourne. Many expected the veteran to make adjustments. Many expected the equalizer. Instead, Eala delivered something even more emphatic. No deciding set required. Straight sets. 2 victories over an Olympic silver medalist in 8 days. The tennis world noticed. These weren't fortunate wins against a depleted opponent. They were victories earned, at close range, against one of the sport's most accomplished professionals. And for a 21-year-old still building her way through the rankings, they announced something clearly, that Alex Eala belonged in conversations she hadn't been part of yet. Her response to all of it? Quiet. Measured. Almost frustratingly calm. She told reporters she takes it week by week. That she surrounds herself with experienced people. That tennis has a way of keeping every player grounded regardless of what the previous match produced. But for Donna Vekić, the story was different. 2 defeats. Both in public. Both watched by growing global audiences. Losses that don't simply disappear from a veteran's memory. They sit there, waiting for the right moment to demand a response. And when the Berlin Open appeared on the calendar, that moment arrived. The wild card that divided a sport, the Berlin Open. A WTA 500 event on grass courts. High ranking points. Major implications heading into Wimbledon. The kind of tournament where presence matters and results carry weight beyond the week itself. Eala arrived in extraordinary form. She had just won her second WTA 125 title, defeating Nicola Pardonova in the Birmingham Open final. She had won 6 consecutive matches on grass. Her game on the surface was no longer a project or a promise. It was a reality. And her name on the draw sheet guaranteed something no organizer could manufacture artificially, genuine, combustible public interest. So organizers awarded her a wild card. Direct entry into the main draw. And the tennis world immediately began to argue about it. On one side, the case was simple. Wild cards exist precisely for players like this. Players in outstanding form, generating excitement, delivering results, and creating the kind of storylines that make tournaments matter to audiences beyond devoted fans. Eala had earned attention through her performances, not just her popularity. The Birmingham title was real. The grass court winning streak was real. The victories over Vekic were real. To her supporters, the wild card was straightforward recognition. On the other side, the argument cut differently. Critics pointed out that several players with comparable, or even slightly higher, rankings had been grinding through qualifying draws and lower-tier events for months, building their positions point by point, tournament by tournament, without the benefit of direct invitations. These players hadn't been fast-tracked anywhere. They had been fighting for every opportunity the conventional way. And now a 21-year-old with an exploding social media profile and thousands of passionate followers had been handed direct entry into a prestigious event through a discretionary invitation from tournament organizers. Was that purely about merit? Or had her popularity become part of the equation? Because the numbers were undeniable. Wherever Eala played, television audiences increased. Ticket demand rose. Social media engagement spiked. Her matches generated headlines in countries that don't typically follow WTA 500 events. The Filipino community, vast, passionate, and extraordinarily organized, transformed every tournament she entered into something bigger than the sum of its draws. In the modern sporting landscape, that kind of reach carries real commercial value. Organizers know it, broadcasters know it, sponsors know it, and tournament committees, when they make wildcard decisions, are not immune to knowing it either. So the question that began circulating through tennis circles, quietly at first, then louder with every passing day, was unavoidable. Was this a reward for results? A marketing decision? Or a combination of both that nobody wanted to say out loud? Depending on who you asked, the answer was entirely different. And the debate that followed split the tennis community down lines that had nothing to do with forehands or serve speeds.
January.
Melbourne. The match that couldn't fit. But the Berlin controversy didn't exist in isolation. Because just as the wild card debate was reaching its loudest point, something that had happened months earlier suddenly resurfaced. A story that had been sitting quietly beneath the surface since January, waiting for the right moment to force its way back into the conversation. And when it did, it reframed everything. January 19th, 2026. Melbourne Park. The Australian Open. For Alex Eala, this was supposed to be one of the most significant mornings of her career. Her main draw debut at a Grand Slam as a ranked professional. The kind of milestone a player works toward for years. The moment when everything that came before it finally leads somewhere that cannot be taken away. The atmosphere surrounding the occasion reflected exactly what it meant. Thousands of Filipino fans had traveled to Melbourne from different cities, from different countries, some from thousands of kilometers away, to witness it in person. Their flags filled corridors. Their chants echoed through the tournament grounds. For them, this wasn't just a tennis match. It was a piece of history being written in real time, and they intended to be present for every word of it. At first, everything felt exactly as it should. Then the problems began. Before a single ball was struck, confusion started spreading through Melbourne Park. The match had been scheduled for Court 6, a venue with a capacity that made sense for a first-round match under normal circumstances. But circumstances around Alex Eala had stopped being normal some time ago. As word spread through the tournament grounds that the match was about to begin, spectators moved toward Court 6 in numbers that the venue simply could not accommodate. Lines formed. Then the lines extended. Then the lines stretched deep into Melbourne Park, pushing back toward the main stadium areas, with hundreds of supporters still arriving and no realistic hope of getting inside. Fans who had traveled across continents found themselves locked out. Families who had planned around this specific morning were watching on outdoor screens, separated from the court by walls they couldn't cross. The energy that was supposed to be inside the venue, the flags, the chants, the noise of a crowd witnessing something meaningful, was instead scattered across the tournament grounds, searching for somewhere to go. The criticism arrived fast, and it arrived loudly. How had organizers assigned one of the most anticipated first-round matches of the tournament to a court this size? How had the demand been so severely underestimated for a player whose popularity had been building publicly and visibly for months? For journalists and observers, the answers felt embarrassingly obvious in hindsight. For the fans locked outside, the frustration was simply real. Inside Court 6, however, something extraordinary was unfolding. The atmosphere that had gathered within those walls was unlike anything most spectators had witnessed in that venue. Filipino flags covered the stands. Chants rose and fell with every point. Every winner produced a surge of sound that seemed disproportionate to the court size. It felt less like a first-round tennis match and more like a final, the energy compressed, concentrated, almost overwhelming in its intensity. And then, during a key moment in the match, Alicia Parks, Eala's opponent, missed an overhead smash. The crowd erupted. And that eruption, the sound of it, the passion behind it, the way it spread instantly across social media, became the moment that told the wider world something it hadn't fully understood until then. The Eala effect wasn't a marketing concept. It wasn't a projection or a hope or a narrative constructed for convenience. It was real. It was present. It was already here. What it all means, so when you place the Berlin wildcard debate alongside the Melbourne overflow, alongside the 2 victories over Vekic, when you lay all of it out together and look at the shape of it, a clearer picture begins to emerge. Alex Eala is not simply a tennis player generating attention. She is a phenomenon that the structures around professional tennis were not entirely built to handle. The scheduling systems weren't designed with her audience in mind. The wildcard criteria weren't written with her particular combination of results and reach in mind. The conversations around fairness and merit and marketability weren't built to account for a player who simultaneously earns her place on the court and transforms the commercial landscape of every event she enters. And that is where the controversy lives. Not in the tennis itself, which has been increasingly, undeniably excellent, but in the space between what she produces on the court and what that production means for everyone around her. For the players who weren't given wildcards. For the fans who couldn't fit inside Court 6. For Donna Vekić, arriving in Berlin carrying 2 defeats and the particular weight of pride that experienced athletes carry when they feel a point has not yet been settled. The match at the Berlin Open was always going to be loaded, but it carried something that went beyond a normal rivalry. It carried the weight of everything that had been said and argued and debated in the weeks and months surrounding both players. It carried questions about belonging and opportunity and whether the sport was applying its own rules consistently. It carried the hopes of millions of Filipino supporters who had invested something real in this young player's journey. And it carried the quiet, determined presence of a 21-year-old who had, by every available measure, already proven that wherever the conversation placed her, she belonged there. The stage in Berlin was set. The questions were already in the air. And the match that followed would not answer all of them, but it would deepen every single one.